disclosure that Mike Pence also kept some classified documents has utterly transformed the tone of the media debate from bemusement to, oh no, this is different, to outright exasperation. Joining us now to analyze the coverage in New York, Will Cain, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. And in Los Angeles, Leslie Marshall, the radio host and Fox News contributor. Will, what do you make of how the media's tone suddenly softened after the revelations about Biden and Pence? And now it's like, oops, what do you know? Heck, this could have happened to anybody.
So, Howie, I agree in part, and I disagree wholeheartedly in part with your opening monologue here on Media Buzz. First of all, I believe that this does show there is some systemic problem in overclassifying and then by extension, not taking care of documents from the federal government. I think that is true. And to your great credit as well, I think it highlights the hypocrisy of the media in the way they covered the raid on Mar-a-Lago, the existence of a raid on Mar-a-Lago in the summer, versus how they've covered Joe Biden this winter. But you said something that I wholeheartedly disagree with.
You have the floor.
Nobody in the press, you said, seriously believes there's anything nefarious when it comes to Joe Biden or Mike Pence. I want to address specifically Joe Biden. Morning Joe has revealed itself to be nothing but a propagandist arm for the existing regime in Washington, D.C. There is an investigation into whether or not Joe Biden's son has corrupt influence peddling deals with foreign adversarial governments. And there are questions about what might be in those documents held in Wilmington, Delaware. To hear Morning Joe try to draw some distinction on false premises, by the way. Biden held that. He held it from before the midterms and revealing it over the winter break. It's not as though he came forward. We're still finding documents, much less some idea that he found a few and has come clean and straight to the authorities.
Well,
that's just a lie, and it covers over the idea or the revelation that there's an investigation into corruption.
Well, just briefly, I was not including Hunter Biden and whatever revelations there may be there in my assessment. What I was saying is that it seems to me that that Biden, there was a problem because they, we've talked about this for weeks now. There was a problem because Biden and his team held it for 2 months, didn't disclose everything they knew. But I want to get Leslie in. It does seem like the conventional media wisdom has now turned on its head. And maybe the problem is there are too many classified documents floating around, and we can't be investigating everybody who stuck something in the wrong closet.
A number of things here. First, I will agree with Will on like 4 words, and that would be, or 2 sentences, and that would be that I think everybody's saying, look, the system doesn't work, obviously, because I think we all know that most likely former President Trump, former Vice President Pence, and current President Biden weren't schlepping boxes on their own. There were people that did this, and there was a process, and how are these documents ranked and classified? That needs to be looked into. When we talk about how the media reacted, when these documents were originally found to be at Mar-a-Lago, this was the first time that we know of in the history of the United States that a former president had classified documents in their residence or outside of the National Archives, the White House, inside the Beltway where they belonged. So that's, I think, why the media went on it. 1, 2, and I'm sorry, when you talk about nefarious, when you look at the things that Donald Trump has said during and since his presidency with regard to the lies about, losing or winning an election, the potential overthrowing of an election and of a government. What happened on January 6th, that this is the reason for the reaction by the media. But then when it's like, oh, Joe Biden did it too. Oh, Mike Pence did it too. Everybody becomes, I don't want to say more desensitized, but calms down some because it seems to be less and less nefarious when you have more people involved.
Well, Donald Trump did face a long, drawn-out subpoena battle, as I mentioned at the top, and I understand your criticism of Morning Joe and the panel. But my question here is, do you think there's any self-examination now by the media, even a smidgen of it, for how that was treated as this horrible betrayal of the United States of America, and now it turns out, obviously, others took classified documents as well?
No, I don't think I don't think the media owns a mirror. I don't think there's any self-awareness or self-reflection. Leslie, you did say, and you did use some words that qualified it very well when you said that we know of. I mean, if we know the timeline. Joe Biden's classified documents date back to his vice presidency. So that predates Donald Trump's administration. Now, we didn't know about it, but clearly classified documents were escaping classified confines much earlier than the presidency of Donald Trump. It's just that the media paid attention to it at a certain venture. And by the way, Howie, I don't, look, I'm not here to criticize Morning Joe in particular. I actually think they're emblematic of the media at large. And I think there is really no interest in any principled discussion here. Me bringing up Hunter, by the way, and those documents, the reason I do is because it's serious. Hunter had access to those classified documents. You know, these potential influence peddling scandals we're talking about were helping pay the rent on some of those houses. Hunter was drawing a salary from Ukraine and getting money in deals with China and paying Joe Biden $50,000 a month for that home. So there's serious national security concerns on specific documents when it comes to Joe Biden. We can still sit here together, the three of us, and say, look, we're really overclassifying documents. That's a clear systemic issue. Yeah. But there's also specific facts and specific instances that deserve scrutiny.
All right. You know, in fairness to Joe Scarborough and his crew, I mean, when the stories were tumbling out about this batch and that batch of documents that President Biden had, they were very critical, and the press really turned aggressively against the president. But now I think it's taken a different turn. So, Leslie, if the current president, the former president, and the former vice president all couldn't keep track of these classified docs, then average folks out there must view this as kind of a beltway flap that can't really be taken that seriously. Do you agree or disagree?
I do agree, and it's not top of mind for voters. I know people think, you know, we're hoping, especially on the right, as you can hear Will saying, which, by the way, all three of us are part of the media. It always amuses me. We're like, you know, Joe Scarborough and the media. We're all part of the media. We're just all different facets of the media. Like I opine, right, for a living as a political analyst and talk show host and Democratic strategist. But, you know, the bottom line here, to your point, Howie, is, first of all, another thing, when you have the National Archives saying, hey, we need those, and then you have to have a subpoena issued, that certainly highlighted it as well. But again, the American people, although they do think it's serious and they do think the system is broken, I don't think now that they're seeing a Republican, a Democrat, a Republican, and now you have people saying to Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush, hey, can you check if you have any documents? Right. I don't think the American people feel it's nefarious and it's a partisan issue. It is a Washington issue.
I've got about a minute for each of you. Will, tell me if this kind of post on Truth Social helps Donald Trump. He talks about the fake news media like CNN, MSDNC, Washington Post, failing New York Times are really doing badly and closing up shop all over the place. Well, nobody's closing up shop. CNN is vacating its massive Atlanta headquarters, which the former president pointed out. And then he says the Washington Post is firing massive numbers of people, actually cutting about 20 newsroom positions. Do these kind of attacks on the press now lose their sting because Trump has made them so often?
No. Look, there are macroeconomic issues that are forcing cuts and layoffs in newsrooms across the industry. There's also simultaneously the fact that newsrooms and media, and I think there are different, I think we can point to a consensus within the media while also saying that we stand out from the media here at Fox. I think everyone can agree on that, by the way. I think that we can also say that the media has lost entire credibility with the audience. Now, is that connected? Is there a declining business model because of the loss of credibility? I do think so. But I don't know that I can, like President Trump, say it's directly related to the current layoffs. All right, let
me jump in because I want to get Leslie. And Trump back on the campaign trail yesterday, or for the first time in this cycle, New Hampshire and South Carolina. Here's something he said in South Carolina.
If I was president, there would not have been a war with Russia in Ukraine. I would have a peace deal negotiated within 24 hours.
So is that helpful while we are fighting or supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia, or is it getting much attention?
A, it's not true. B, it's not helpful. C, for some of his followers, his MAGA base, anything he says is rah-rah. They're going to cheer it, and it gives him equal or more credibility. But I think to the rest of the world, it's kind of like, you know, been there, done that, got the T-shirt, don't want to go back, and we're tired of hearing this. It's not helpful. I think everyone would agree, regardless of your politics, we need to be united in supporting Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, against the oppression and the war that was brought upon them by Vladimir Putin.
Right. Well, I mean, anybody running for president, of course, though, has to address Ukraine. Let me get a break when Facebook said Donald Trump is allowed back on its platform after a 2-year ban, the media uproar was lightning quick and predictably partisan. Well, the second that Meta announced the lifting of the ban, it seemed like every left-wing commentator or left-leaning commentator said this is awful, this is dangerous. You just heard Mara Gay of the New York Times saying he'd been handed the keys to democracy. It's a social media app. A little bit too much hyperventilating?
Yeah, I'd say slightly. I don't know where they take it from here. They've already gone 1 to 10. Is there an 11? A threat to democracy, violence on our doorstep. It's really striking how much the press absolutely abhors free speech. In a way, it's also like, the barber industry wanting to make sure all barbers are licensed. Like, it actually plays into the media's advantage to assume that there are some people that shouldn't have free speech, that only they should have free speech. But it's really, really revealing how antagonistic they are and how much they embrace censorship. Really quickly on this note, yeah, of course the sitting president of the United States should have free access to their platforms, and it's absurd that he didn't. But on that violence note, like so many things, Howie, President Trump's words have always been twisted into a falsehood. I mean, I give you the very fine people moment in his presidency, which I'm sure you've done on this show. Did he say what they said he said? Well, on January 6th, there is no example of him inciting violence. So what is the threat now? There wasn't one in the past. There's not one to point to. And so you can't use it as an escape hatch now to once again revert to censorship.
Well, Leslie, I'll come back to January 6th, but this hasn't been talked about much on Fox. But the main benefit of Facebook to Donald Trump in the last campaign wasn't messaging. He had Twitter for that. And, of course, he's been restored by Elon Musk. But it was online fundraising and advertising. So that could be a significant factor in this coming campaign.
Facebook is a company. They could care less if Donald Trump wins or loses, runs, etc. They care about money and their bottom line. That's not just Facebook. That's any company, social media company or otherwise. They're having him back because they lost people on Facebook, and that means they lost money, and that's their bottom line, and that is the only reason. I'm sorry, when somebody says you're banned, to me that's a permanent thing, and when these companies go, you're banned today for an hour, for a week, that's not a ban. I don't care if it's Donald Trump or if it's me. I mean that's the reality there. But with regard to January 6th, it is social media, and not just the former president, but social media and comments on social media, not just Facebook, but other media outlets as well, social media outlets, that led to what happened on that day. And that day certainly did become violent, and there was even threats to people's lives, as we know, both Democrats and Republicans, and certainly to our democracy. So I don't think that people are overreacting on my side of the aisle with response to this decision.
Well, you have the burden, if you embrace censorship, if you embrace censorship in response to that, you have the burden of directly connecting it to the former president of the United States, whom you intend to ban. And it seems to me that when I hear those clips, by the way, that you play from Facebook,
private companies don't have to apply to the First Amendment doesn't apply to private
Leslie,
companies.
I'm just using my ears.
So
I'm just using my ears.
private companies
Hold on
can
real quick.
censor
May I
anyone
finish?
they want.
Let me just finish really quickly. I'm just using my ears, and I'm listening to Facebook essentially adopt the idea of the standard of law. When they say if he incites violence, they are echoing the laws of the United States. That is when censorship can be allowed under our laws and Constitution. They seem to be adopting that. And then, therefore, you need to show me where his incitement to violence lie. Show me the tweet. Show me the statement that incited violence.
Well, of course, that's been a subject of a years-long debate. Just before you do, Leslie, I want to ask you a question, and you can come back to Will's point. And the question is, wasn't Facebook under considerable pressure to lift this ban, especially with the House Republican majority coming in and aiming for social media companies? And then you can talk about, whether he incited or didn't incite. Intentions were running high 2 years ago. What's the possible justification for continuing it now?
Well, you're right. I mean, Republicans have power in the House. Again, Facebook's looking at their bottom line and what's going to best serve them. And if there's going to be any legislation that would hurt them and other social media outlets, which they don't care about, they care about themselves, and they care about their bottom line, then those decisions are going to be made based on that. I mean, I think we're pretty naive if we think otherwise. If Democrats take over in a couple of years, you might see, a ban again. Here's my point.
Very briefly.
To what Will was saying. Very briefly. What Will was saying, and my point is the hypocrisy. I've had people on the right try and cancel me, many other people on the left. They want us banned. They want me off Fox, et cetera. It's got to go both ways. If you don't want censorship of the right, then you can't ask for censorship of the left.
I'm glad.
I agree.
Okay. I'm glad you're both here, and I'm glad we have that moment of agreement.
We agree.
Thanks very much.